Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Slurp Squad News Report. This one's going to be a little bit of a long one, so make sure that you utilize the timestamps that are going to be throughout the video or in the description. Let's go ahead and start off with the schedule for this week. Schedule's really simple, pretty typical. Tuesday, Thursday, we're going into Mythic and Mirrorsil. Wednesday, we have our webinar. Friday, there's game night, and Sunday, we have the return of the alt runs due to the absolute travesty that is Mist of Pandaria Remix. We will no longer be doing Mist of Pandaria Remix main raids. Clearly, it was designed for a different reason than for a guild to be participating in. So, with the disinclusion of Mist of Pandaria Remix, expect every Sunday to now feature our typical alt runs. Otherwise, I want to go ahead and make you aware that raid testing is coming soon, TM. It's going to replace our main raid days, but it likely won't line up directly with our main raid days and definitely won't line up with our raid times. It's expected that you will show up if you are able to. Imagine these as main raid nights where they are required, but you're not going to be harshly judged if you have other things which prevent you from participating. This is likely going to be for the individual boss raid tests. They will likely be during the middle of the day during Blizzard business hours. So that would mean that between around 3 p.m. CST all the way until 7 p.m. CST, that may be their raid testing window. And usually those will be Monday through Friday, so around the time when a lot of people are at work. If you're unable to make those, again, it's not a huge deal, but we really would want you to. Our raid testing will be recorded just so that you are able to go back and watch and see what you missed and be able to get an idea for what the boss is. These will replace our main raid days, meaning that if raid testing is announced for that week, for however many hours raid testing persists, let's say it's a 3-hour raid testing week, then that would mean that we will reduce our raid time by 3 hours on main raid days. Speaking of raid testing, let's go ahead and talk about our plans for the remainder of Season 4 in a priority list. The first priority is raid testing. Realistically, we're focusing on the first tier in the War Within as the real tier that we want to be pushing and trying to get the best world ranking that we can and perform the best that we can. While Season 4 is a grounds for us to improve to reach those goals. So raid testing takes top priority. And as I said, it will replace main raid nights, respective to how many raid testing hours there are. The second goal is to kill each end boss 1 or 2 times. Basically, we want to have gone through everything at least once or twice just to get a bunch of people experience on not only killing end bosses and how end bosses are very positionally challenging, but also the ability to re-clear those bosses later on and maintain what you learned, even though there's going to be a gap of maybe 1 or 2 weeks between kills. The other thing is we're going to start doing strat meetings. Basically, once strategies are made before raid testing starts, we will sit down as an entire guild on a main raid night for about an hour and a half and go over each boss, talk it through, discuss if there are things we want to change with the strategies, etc. And we'll probably do this 2 or 3 times before the launch of the War Within. Next, webinars will start to move towards main raid nights and become required attendance, just as a expectation that we no longer really care about killing the end bosses anymore. And webinars take priority as they're a primary way in which you can improve and we can improve the overall level of the guild. Then we have Farak mount farming, which we likely will do at least once per week until everyone gets their mounts, and then still may do a few more just so that we can get some gold in the guild bank before the War Within starts. And then finally, end of tier party and other guild events will still happen on main raid days as Season 4 starts to grind down. We will re-clear something every week in raid, as well as these other things, except on raid testing weeks. Now I want to talk about all the different things that are changing. We had the episode on future-proofing, which started to give you the ideas of what the officer team and I were talking about. And now we're starting to put those ideas into action. The first thing that's changing is we had the large guild discussion on the sheet, and primarily the weekly summary portion of the sheet. And we had a long talk between the officers about everything and decided that we were going to start using analyst threads. And these threads are private to just you, the other officers, and the analysts. That means that this is supposed to be an open line of communication between you and us, where you'll get essentially a more detailed version of the weekly summary inside of those threads every single week. Now, we've decided to go ahead and assign one person to each individual. This is so that you have someone who truly knows how you're performing on a deep level and has a much better understanding of you as an overall player to allow you to talk with them on a consistent basis while the others that are participating inside of that channel are there to assist. Remember that we are just trying to help you improve. Nothing is personal, and it's intended that you would talk with us consistently over the course of your weekly summary being posted. Don't just let it sit there and then be like, okay, cool, I read it. We want to constantly be conversing and try and figure things out. And I want to refer you to the graph from our first webinar episode where you're going to get an external discovery from this analyst thread weekly summary. And you should apply critical thinking to that and then try to test things, make an internal discovery, and then apply critical thinking and talk back with the analyst on things that you figured out and things that you've been working on. Then utilize another external discovery that the analyst will give back to you. This is how you can kind of create a circle of improvement and rapidly get to a point where you are improving not just week over week, but maybe raid night over raid night through utilizing the tools that we're giving to you. And if you ever lose your analyst thread, just remember that you can click on the Analyst Threads channel and you can go to the top right and click on this little thread button and it will bring back up where your analyst thread is. Now, what is the process for those weekly reviews and summaries? Basically, the officers are going to get something which kind of looks like a differentiation on the original sheet, which is put together by me. Basically, I will give you a score or a parse in the 4 categories we previously talked about, as well as add context for the analyst to be able to give them a base to go off of. The analysts have a much deeper understanding of where these scores actually come from, and that's why they're going to be able to utilize these to a better degree, and the analysts also have a more direct line of communication with me where we can discuss on any confusion they have with this. They will then use this as a jumping off point to give you bulleted focus points and give you a foundation of what to focus on for that week and what you need to improve. It'll look something like the image at the bottom right, where basically it'll say throughput, what your score was, and a description of what you need to think about, mechanics, or it may only have one thing which we really want you to focus on for that week. It's important to remember, going back to episode 1 of the webinar series, that you need to target one specific area or one specific thing so that you can actually improve. If you're trying to do a bunch of things at once, it's not going to work. This is also intended to give you not the solution. It's supposed to direct you to the solution. It's intended that you still go through the process of self-discovery and self-improvement, because if we handhold you all the way through, then that's just going to make you a worse player in the long run. You need to still go through the process of learning and figuring out and searching for the issues on your own and not just relying on the analyst to do that for you. That's why these are going to be more bulleted focus points rather than overarching ideas on specifics how to fix the problem. It's going to point you towards the problem to allow you the opportunity to research and find out for yourself the exact solution. On weekly summaries, they're going to be released at the same time every single week, so there's no question of when they're coming out. That time is 7 p.m. CST on Sundays every single week. So don't go asking where your summary is, where your report card is, any of that. It will come 7 p.m. CST on Sunday every single week. If you don't receive one, please go ahead and ping inside of your analyst thread and be like, hey, where's my summary? And we'll figure it out. And just so you know exactly who is assigned to you, let's go back here real quick. Alden is doing the melee. Ali is doing tanks along with me. Ali is also doing Shadow Priest, Evokers, and Hunters. Light is doing the healers. And Short Pots will be doing Warlocks, Mages, Ellie Shamans, and Balance Druids. Next, let's talk about the sheet. We talked about the weekly summary portion of the sheet, but what about the actual sheet portion of the sheet? Well, we've discovered over the course of attempting to put this together week over week that the amount of time it takes is simply non-sustainable. The average is around every 10 pulls takes around an hour, And considering the fact that we're progging 9 hours, and over the course of those 9 hours, we likely pool 90 times, then now you're looking at an 18-hour week of just studying the raid. And that's simply not sustainable in the long run. So we're transitioning the sheet while our guild, frankly, is at a lower level to not include the minor mistakes to try and save time. We're also going to combine mistakes which are similar and only put one entry for those, and maybe just a note that it happened multiple times or a note that it happened to multiple people. We're also only going to be focusing on mistakes which happen consistently, which cause wipes, or specifically inhibit prog and may not have been noticed by other people. For example, if someone was pre-positioning incorrectly for the first Firestorm on Farak, that would be pointed out as a prog inhibitor, even though it didn't technically cause a wipe or wasn't necessarily super consistent. It's something that needs to be discussed so that everyone is aware of how that mechanic is actually supposed to be handled. The other thing is that the things which need to be reviewed by the entire raid and not just the one indicated in the very left column are going to be highlighted in red, and the sheet is to be released by Monday at 8 p.m. CST. It might not be exactly Monday at 8 p.m. CST, but expect the update to be done by that time so that you can review it before raid on Tuesday. Next, let's talk raid strategies. These are going to be created by me prior to raid testing starting. These are then going to be reviewed by me, Justin, and Light so that we can adjust these and make sure that it makes sense. At that point, we will then take it into a whole raid meeting during a main raid day. So we would say instead on Tuesday, we're only going to take an hour to actually raid, and then the last 2 hours of our raid slot from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. are going to be on a strat meeting going over each boss for Nerubar Palace, and particularly the ones that we are raid testing the following week. We will make sure that everything makes sense and that everyone is clear on what to do. That way we can be efficient with our time during raid testing, not only for our own benefit, but for the benefit of giving feedback to the boss designers. We will then repeat this process after raid testing and review with the whole raid the week before the raid launches. So 1 week before the raid releases, on the level up week of the War Within, we will go over exactly what we're going to do for each individual boss at that current time, and utilize the raid testing footage to describe those in more detail and give you an actual POV version of the strategy that we're going to be trying to create. Next, overhaul raid and guild health reviews are going to be done on a consistent basis, unscheduled by me. I typically do this just naturally, but I'm going to try and publicize the information a little bit more. The non-politicized, kind of candid version of this review is going to be shared with the officers and then discussed to see if there's something that maybe I missed or I misinterpreted or they feel is more important to highlight. And then that information is going to be dispersed to the entire guild through a health update video along with a thread similar to the one that was created for future-proofing for discussion and feedback. These topics and these things will include our prog expectations and how we're currently performing relative to those, the overall roster health, the efficiency of our raids and things we could be improving, how leadership is currently performing and the things that we're looking at to change from the top end, and etc. Basically, anything to do with the overarching guild and how we're performing and the logistical aspect of the guild will be included in these. Next, let's discuss the healing sheet. The healing sheet has also been processized, and this process will basically be the initial creation is done by Light a couple of weeks before we get to the boss. Then 1 week before we start the boss, me, Justin, and Light are going to review the sheet and make any adjustments that we feel are necessary. Finally, 3 days before starting the boss, all the healers are going to meet up and talk with Light to discuss the strategies and try and figure out exactly what the ideas behind the sheet being created are, why the CDs are placed in certain spots, and then healers can give their opinions and try and give feedback to change anything that they feel is necessary, as well as have the sheet fresh on their mind going into the boss. And the whole idea for this is to allow time for changes to be made before we start using it. It's detrimental to prog if we're having to change the sheet both for the general raid and for each individual healer who's having to press their CDs at the same time and is trying to script if we're changing it after prog has started. So it's important that we allow time for those changes to be made, and also that you give feedback to allow us time to and the information to be able to change. Now let's talk about our weekly goals. First, we want to kill Farak this week, just straight up. Not talking about tonight's Farak reclear starting in about 20 minutes, but talking about Mythic Awakened Farak. Then we want to begin the first wave of final roster decisions. These will only include a few players who we're very confident will be with us going into the War Within, just so that you already know, and then we'll start figuring out with those final roster decisions, as far as who the players are, what specs those players will be playing. Then we want to go ahead and begin all the new processes which we just talked about, and we want to evaluate how they're performing, how much the time efficiency actually is worth. Is it a good thing that we started this? Is it not actually worth the amount of time we're having to put in? What are we getting out of it? Finally, we want to continue improving the guild and trying to give feedback to all of you on a deeper level consistently. I think transparency is really important, and the more transparent we can be and the more information we can give you, the better, and the better overall the guild will become. That's all I've got for this week, and I'll see you guys very shortly.